My message is that I think we should now consider those restrictions, because by having too many restrictions, we are tying one hand of the Ukrainian armed forces on their back, because they're reducing their capability to defend themselves, especially in light of the nature of the fighting now taking place in the Kharkiv region, where the Russians can be protected by the national border, which is more or less the same as the front line.
The concept of atomic war is too horrible for man to endure and to practice, and he must find some way out of it. That's all I think about this thing.
It is uncivilized on the part of all of us to be sitting here with the only deterrent to war, offensive nuclear weapons, that in such numbers that both of us could threaten the other with the death and the annihilation of millions and millions of each other's people.
Incrementalism, the slow, gradual build-up to destruction in terms of war, in terms of how the United States is handling its proxy war against Russia. Incrementalism is this strategy that the U.S. has been using to slow walk its build-up into higher and higher levels of aggression. So when this thing popped off when Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2022, even though it really started in 2014, but when the Russian forces entered Ukraine in 2022, the United States said, okay, well, I guess it's a wrap. Zelensky, you can come on over here. We'll give you a ride. We'll give you a mansion or something. Then they said, you know what? How about we send you some money and defensive weapons? Defensive weapons only. We're only going to allow you to defend your city, defend your capital city, defend your homes, because we push you into this war. So it's only right that we give you weapons to defend yourself. So all of y'all are not slaughtered. Maybe some of y'all, but not all of y'all. Then they said, okay, the defensive weapons are not enough, and we really don't like Russia, Putin bad. So let's give you offensive weapons. How about you not only defend your homes, but how about you delete some Russians while you're at it? Because we love that. We love to see some Russian bodies on the ground somewhere in the middle woods in Ukraine. Then they said, you know what? How about we give you the Stinger? You can use that against the tank. But we can't go any further than that, because anything worse than that will provoke Putin and we might be in World War III. Oh, no. Okay. How about we give you HIMARS? How about we give you longer range missile systems? How about we give you tanks? So this pattern has been the United States becoming more and more aggressive, becoming more and more bold towards doing things to piss off the Russians. And the Russians have been extremely patient, I believe, by not directly attacking U.S. supply lines, U.S. logistics systems, U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine. They kept saying, okay, we're going to give you these systems, but it didn't work out. So they would give them a alleged better system. Now, there was a big fuss, a lot of hubbub about the tanks last year, year and a half ago. Oh, we need the tanks. We need the tanks so bad. If we only get the tanks, we can destroy Russia. Putin is going to shit himself if he see the M1 Abrams rolling down the streets. Now, the United States, I believe, didn't want to send those tanks over there because the M1 Abrams was going to be exposed as nothing more than an overrated money scheme, because they use it over there against third world countries, but the United States knew it was severely flawed, and against a pure enemy, you'll see a bunch of them burning. So they made all this fuss talking about, well, we're going to downgrade the tanks. So just in case you see them burning, they're not the real tanks. They're not the real tanks. The United States spent so much money and pushed so much bravado and hype on these tanks, and so many people got rich off of it, that they didn't want to lose this type of cash cow. They just wanted to keep the illusion that it was so unstoppable, so great, the greatest tank of all time. But now we see them burning. We see them burning by the bunches over there in the woods, in the fields of Ukraine. So they escalated things, sending tanks, even though they said, no, we're not going to send tanks because they will piss the Russians off, and who knows what happened after that. All this talk about the jets. But apparently they're supposed to be sending jets. Are the jets there? Are the jets not there? Who knows what's really going on behind the scenes there. But the United States is also worried. They didn't want to send the F-16 because they're supposed to be the world-class Gen 4 fighter, unstoppable, look at all these countries cower before us. But the United States Air Force in modern time has not gone against a real air defense, a peer-to-peer air defense. And again, the United States didn't want their systems, their overrated systems being exposed by finally facing a real enemy and not just their own country. But they slow walked all of that. And even having soldiers in Ukraine, at first they would outright blatantly lie about soldiers being over there. But over the last several months, there's been discussion. Okay, soldiers on the ground. There's been these quote unquote leaks, like the Germans leaked about British troops being on the ground over there. America said, oh, well, we have troops over there, but they're just in the embassy. Okay, well, we have these troops over there, but they're not doing anything. They're just trying to help the Ukrainians set up the systems. They're not involved in combat. They're not doing anything like that. So over time, we go from nobody's over there, stop making stuff up, to, yeah, well, we have a few over there just protecting the embassy. We have a handful doing this and that. And now Macron over there in France has constantly been talking about sending troops. I'm going to send 2,000 troops. And 2,000, because that's really all he has. Because the French military is terrible, but that's a different story. So they talk about nobody's over there, no troops, no NATO troops, and all of a sudden, now, well, there's a few over here, and these leaks coming out, well, we have this amount, and we might send in this amount. So they have been gradually escalating things, becoming more bold, more brazen, and more psychotic about ending the world and a nuclear holocaust. But I believe that they slow walk these things because it gives them time to garner political support. Because when this thing popped off, people were saying no tanks at all, no U.S. troops, no offensive weapons, no jets. But as politicians cry, bitch, and moan about it for months and months, they keep giving all these interviews with Zelensky begging and begging. After several months, a lot of people softened and said, okay, I guess you can do this. And they just keep doing it. And eventually, we're just going to escalate to the point where we're full-blown World War III. We might already be in World War III, but it hasn't turned hot directly against Russia and NATO openly, because there has been NATO troops killed by the Russians because they are engaged over there. But there hasn't been open conflict between NATO and Russia. But that's what we're pushing for. We're just gradually getting there. And these things start slowly. World War I, World War II, they started over years. We can look at documentaries, we look at history books, and it seems like, okay, this happened, this happened. It seems like it happened so fast. But it will be some things that built over a couple of months, and then a year later, some more things build up. So it takes years for these wars to get to their climax. So we might be in the beginning of World War III. We just don't know it yet. Only history will tell that. But we're at the point now where the United States is authorizing Ukrainians to directly attack Russia inside of Russia with American weapons. So U.S. forces are selecting targets in Russia because the Ukrainians are not using these systems. A lot of, especially targeted systems, highly classified information, intelligence, satellites, and all of that. U.S. forces are using this. U.S. forces are looking into Russia. They're selecting the target. They're providing the weapon, the financing, the logistics, and they're just saying, okay, Ukraine, you push the button, figuratively. Ukraine, you're going to be the person who actually launches the weapon, allegedly. But the United States is doing everything else. This is, in essence, the United States directly attacking Russia. But again, with this incrementalism, they're saying, well, only the bases. We're going to allow the Ukrainians to use NATO weapons, U.S. weapons, inside of Russia, but only against Russian military forces, only against the bases for now. Let's take a look at Macron. Speaking of Macron, let's take a look at him talking about it.
We think that we should allow them to neutralize military sites from which the missiles are fired. The missiles and basically the military sites from which Ukraine is attacked. But we must not allow them to hit other targets in Russia. Obviously civilian capabilities or other military targets.
So Macron's statement, that was part of garnering political support. He talked about it. The German chancellor talked about it. The head of NATO, he talked about it. Stoltenberg, whatever the hell his name is. And finally, Biden's administration, they caved and they permitted Ukraine, attack the Russians inside of Russia.
This is a notable shift in policy by the White House, and it comes amid a lot of pressure right now in the administration to get on the same page as what NATO and America's European allies have been saying.
That's right, Peter. And the original intent here was President Biden and his administration wanted to be careful to provide weapons, but to not be so provocative that American weapons could be used inside Russia, perhaps drawing the U.S. into a direct conflict with Russia. That has been one of the principal ideas behind the president's approach since the war in Ukraine began. Now we're at a point 2+ years into the fighting where what we see is that Ukraine has suffered dramatic setbacks over the relentless push from Russia, and some of that is staged inside Russia and then targeting Ukraine. And so making this adjustment, which, as you pointed out, is aligned with some of the thinking of European allies who are also critically important in support for Ukraine, would allow Ukraine to prevent those attacks by striking inside Russia at the bases or operation points where Russian soldiers and forces are working on their own land, but projecting munitions into Ukraine. So that's the sort of scope that we're talking about here. This isn't about going to Moscow or a more aggressive approach, but trying to prevent damage by attacking inside Russia where needed.
And Dan, let me bring you into this conversation a bit. And you and I were talking in the break here, right? This is part of a pattern, and it's one that conservatives, Republicans have criticized the White House on here, which is them sort of slow walking in the eyes of these critics, being reluctant before finally agreeing. Tanks, fighter jets, and beyond. The White House recognizing they needed to do more to help Ukraine sort of take the handcuffs off.
Now, a lot of this could have something to do with the Kharkiv advance. So the West is running out of options in Ukraine. Ukraine is slowly being attrited away. The Russians, they're not looking for some massive land grab. They're not trying to turn Ukraine back into part of Russia, into the Soviet Union, all that propaganda that we hear from these neocons over here. The Russians are destroying the Ukrainian military. They're basically destroying their ability to fight back. And the way they're doing this is through attrition. So NATO has realized that this proxy war is the biggest mistake in the organization's history. NATO should have never engaged in this. But now they're trapped. Now they're stuck in it. And they have no more good moves to play. So they either have to come to peace terms, which is an admission that they can't beat Russia, that big bad NATO, so unstoppable, and Russia's so trash, so sorry, so weak. NATO, in its proxy war, all this money, all of this high-tech military equipment, Russia running out of missiles allegedly, NATO can't beat Russia in this proxy war. So they'll either have to come to some peace terms or go the complete opposite and double down on this bad hand. Just send us all into oblivion and continue to escalate things, even though they know there's no pathway to victory. So let's actually take a look at this. So we got Kharkiv over here. This is the second largest city in Ukraine. The Russians, for the most part, have been in this region here, this banana-shaped region. But this is only a fraction of the Russian military. Ukraine is giving its all over here, even though they've lost hundreds of thousands of men already. What's remaining of the Ukrainian military is fighting the Russians and getting slaughtered over here. The Russians are slowly pushing, taking village after village, city after city. And now they're pushing into Kharkiv. They're really close to taking the city. They've taken suburbs around it, villages around it, and they've opened a new front up here out of Belgorod. They sent tens of thousands of troops, and Ukraine is already stretched in. So now they have to rob Peter to pay Paul. They have to take troops away from the Donbass to go up here towards Kharkiv. They just don't have the assets. And this is one of the reasons why NATO also wants to send its own troops over there, because the Ukrainian military is depleted. They're running out of men to fight. They're running out of men to die. The average age of a Ukrainian soldier is 43 years old. You got middle-aged men over here fighting against the Russians because the young men have either fled the country or are dead. But Belgorod has been selected by the United States to be a target. So apparently they used the HIMARS. The Ukrainians used a U.S. HIMARS rocket system to destroy a Russian S-400. So they claim. Now, this picture here is what was published. This is the Telegraph, which is a very, very anti-Russian publication over there in the UK. Now, to me, I'm not an expert on these specific type of systems, but it doesn't look like and that's 400 to me, because I've looked at plenty of these, and that doesn't look like it. But it could have been some vehicle with it. When I first looked at this, my thought was, damn, they got a really close-up, nice, crisp picture. If you're in Ukraine launching across the border and you allegedly hit this system, how did you get such a nice, clean, crisp image of it? It's almost as if this image might be made up, as if it's a fake. This same publication, The Telegraph, also lied about Iran and Israel. So Iran launched the missiles over there and hit the runway, destroyed the runway over there, where Israel keeps its F-35s. They hit this air base over there. But the propaganda media quickly said, oh, look at this hole in the ground. Let's take a look at this. Look at this hole in the ground. The missile hit here. It didn't hit anywhere else. Now, if you look, you can see there's a big pile of dirt where clearly the Israelis or somebody dug up a hole before the camera started rolling, put all the dirt on the side, and said, oh, yeah, this is where the missile hit. Because they're lying sacks of shit. Propaganda. There's no burn mark on the ground, anything. This is clearly a hole they dug and no missile hit there. In the same way, they're talking about, oh, well, we launched a HIMARS rocket over there and destroyed a Russian defense system. I don't believe you because you guys are always lying about crap. But yeah, the Russians have opened up a force over here and the Ukrainians are in a heap of trouble. So NATO is saying, let's just hit Russia. Let's strike inside of Russia. Let's send some drones toward Moscow. Let's do whatever we can because we're losing and there's no way for us to win. So let's just try to cause chaos, escalate things, and go from there. These people don't think ahead. These politicians don't know anything about warfare, but they're making warfare decisions. And the people and the generals in charge, they're very close to the military industrial complex and to the politicians. So their decisions are not made off of military knowledge, but more related to money and politics. So they're losing. And eventually, it's going to come to the point where the Ukrainian military either has to rise up and get rid of Zelensky because he's just sending them to their grave, or they're all going to be wiped out by the Russians. They're going to blame this on the Republicans. They're going to say, well, this is all happening because Mike Johnson and the Republicans didn't get that $60 billion, even though 2/3 of that $60 billion was just money laundered, immediately sent to the military industrial complex, sent to politicians in Ukraine and the United States. They're going to say, well, this only happened because the Republicans didn't continue to finance this lost war. So they're going to continue to escalate. They're going to escalate to the point where we're in open combat. The United States and Russia are in open, direct combat because they're attacking the side of Russia. And we always get these headlines saying, well, Putin warns or Putin threatens. And people always mock Putin. Putin has been laughed at and all that. People are saying, well, if I had $1 every time Putin gave a warning, I'd be a rich man, stuff like that. Because many people simply believe that he won't do anything. Now, there's some psychopaths who believe maybe he will do something, but they just don't give a damn. But there are a lot of people who think, yeah, Putin is bluffing, Putin won't do anything. Let's look at this clip of Putin talking about this escalation.
The representatives of countries that are NATO members, particularly in Europe, particularly in small countries, should be aware of what they're playing with. They should remember that these are primarily countries with small territory and dense population. And this factor they should take into account before they speak about strikes deep into the Russian territory.
Now, is he bluffing? I can't say for sure. We could all wake up one morning and it'll be our last day on Earth because we'll find ourselves in a nuclear war. But who knows? It's really hard to tell exactly what he's going to do. Now let's listen to the UK opposition leader, Keir Starmer, whatever the hell his name is. He's trying to be the next prime minister of the UK. But let's listen to him kind of responding to Putin and talking about using nukes.
Firstly, on the nuclear deterrence, it's fundamental. It's a vital part of our defence, and of course that means we have to be prepared to use it. Now, nobody who aspires to be Prime Minister would set out the circumstances in which it would be used. That would be irresponsible, but it is there as a vital part of our defence, so of course we would have to be prepared to use it. On the other point you put to me, look, this is a changed Labour Party, and the most important thing is that I voted in favour of the nuclear deterrent. And if we are privileged to come in to serve, I will serve as the Prime Minister of this country. And my commitment to the nuclear deterrent is absolute. absolute. That is why I voted for it. That is why I've changed this party. And that's why it will be the number one issue for an incoming Labour government.
UK is trying to remind Russia, well, we have nukes too. So a tit-for-tat exchange, I think, will quickly turn into a nuclear war. We always have a lot of people talking about, well, let's just, hit them with one tactical nuke and blow some Russians away just to show them we're serious. Like, we're nuclear powered. NATO has thousands of nukes. Let's just show the Russians. But if they tried it, I think it's just going to quickly escalate into a nuclear war. UK is talking about its nuclear power, even though I'm not really sure, but that's a different story too about the UK's military. But the thing about it is the UK is not being attacked. Russia is being directly attacked, and that's Putin's red line. Don't hit us, don't attack us, don't come here killing my civilians, don't be attacking Russian cities, don't be sending NATO troops openly into a conflict here. And I think Putin stands more firmly on his red lines than the U.S. has been. We've had presidents of the United States who've had these red lines. We just had Biden. He gave Israel a red line in Gaza about Rafah. Israel ignored him. Biden didn't do anything. Then we know Obama infamously had that red line against Syria with chemical weapons back in the day. Bush with Kim Jong-il and North Korea when they were testing those weapons back in the mid-2000s, testing nukes. Bush gave North Korea a red line. You better not test a nuclear weapon. They did it anyway. Bush didn't do anything. So U.S. presidents have a history of giving red lines and then immediately folding when the red line is crossed. Now, will Putin do the same thing? They're in the cities. They just allegedly hit Belgorod. Now, I think that image was fake, but I'm not really sure. But would Putin stand firm on his red line? Because all of these examples of the U.S. presidents, their red lines involve regional conflicts, regional wars, or potential regional wars. Putin's red line is about the sovereignty and survival of Russia. So his red line is a World War III scenario. So Putin's warning people, and a lot of people don't believe him. But who knows exactly what's in this man's head? Who knows what the hell he would do? So incrementalism, that's what we've been talking about. The U.S. slowly building up, NATO slowly building up, more and more aggression, getting more and more bold and doing things against Russia. It seems like the West will continue this. They will continue to get more and more aggressive against Russia until they finally have to fight directly against the Russians. This is a war that NATO is not prepared for. If you dig deep and look into the state of Western European militaries, Germany, France, Denmark, Italy, UK, these militaries are woefully unprepared to go to war with Russia. But they keep provoking, they keep escalating things. France wants to send troops directly over there. Germany is talking about, well, let's just use some of our weapons to directly attack Crimea. UK is talking about, well, we have nukes too, talking about nuking Russia. So these Western European countries, they're shells of their former selves. I think France and UK particularly, they're still living in the glory days of 100 years ago. 200 years ago when they had the empires, and they just hate the fact that they're second-rate countries now. They're not global powers anymore, and they're still living as if they're global powers. Spain was also a global power at one point, but they got so many internal issues that they're not doing much tripping right now, even though they do have some assets in Ukraine too. But I believe even if all of these weak-ass European nations mustered up all of their forces, put them together to go against Russia, I think Putin will still keep the war conventional. I don't think he would just go to nuclear war right away. And we heard Putin talk about these smaller NATO members. In fact, let's pull up a map real quick so we can see. So we got some very, very trash military, very small, waste of breath militaries in NATO. We got Croatia, Slovenia, Macedonia. Like, what the hell are these countries going to do, man? Denmark, Estonia. These countries are tiny and weak. And he said, look, you guys are really small and your populations are very dense. So you're tiny countries packed up into one or two cities. He's basically saying these countries are sitting ducks. Easy targets. Target practice. So these countries are very confident that the United States can come save them. So these little tiny countries talk all this ish because the moment something happens, U.S. come save us. But I don't know. It'll probably be too late for them if something popped off. Especially Finland, because Finland is right next to Russia, and was neutral, but they bought into the propaganda, and now they'll be one of the first ones to get wiped out if this hot war does pop off. Like I said, I do think Putin would keep it conventional because I believe, looking at the current state of NATO's military, specifically the Europeans, I believe Putin can beat them in a conventional war. A ground war in Eastern Europe, NATO will lose that. Unless the U.S. got involved, things might change some, but then again, U.S. military has issues too, and Russia will have home field advantage. So Russia could even win that, but I don't know, because Putin does have tactical nukes deployed to the front line, and Putin has said that if you guys want to gang up on me 30 on 1, I'm gonna just have to launch nukes at everybody. So I don't know if Russia would even waste its time going into a conventional war, because if he goes into a conventional war and gives NATO several years, maybe NATO could build up to push against them. But who knows how that happened. That's a separate video analyzing a World War III situation. But basically, I think he can beat Europe in a conventional war, but he may just nuke them anyway. Is what I'm getting at. And a tactical nuclear war in Europe would probably, very likely, escalate into a strategic nuclear war between Russia and the United States, because the United States is going to want to protect its vassal states over there. And that'll be the end of the world. But let me know what you guys think about this incrementalism, this gradual build up. The United States constantly saying, okay, we can't do this, and then eventually crosses that line. They're constantly getting more and more aggressive, constantly saying, okay, you can strike here, do this, do this. And now we're at the point where the United States is saying, okay, it's completely fine to use U.S. weapons, U.S. targeting systems, with U.S. intelligence giving you information to attack inside of Russia. What do you guys think about this? Leave me your thoughts below. Share the video. Thanks for watching.